Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation. It's another episode of the Mimi and Greg Show. Lazarus Comic fans, beware. Major spoiler alerts for Risen 7 lie ahead. For those that have not yet begun their Lazarus journey, Greg shares a lot of insight in the collaborative process in comic creation. We recorded this episode well in advance, but for my loyal podcast subscribers, I purposely released this episode after the launch of Lazarus Risen 7 so that fans could get a chance to read the issue. Greg has been juggling multiple projects while working on The Old Guard 2 in Italy, so I'm always grateful he takes time out of his busy schedule to podcast. I also share some highlights from my Galapagos trip. For those that don't already know, Greg Rucka is a New York Times bestselling author of hundreds of comics and nearly 24 novels. He is also the writer for his critically acclaimed and award-winning film, The Old Guard, starring Charlize Theron. I'm loving these conversations and hope you are too. If you are, please rate my podcast on your platform of choice and share it with others. If you would like to support with a donation to help keep this podcast going and support the work I do, you can become a patron of the show by visiting my website or patreon.com/SifuMimiChan. For comments or suggestions, reach out on social media at SifuMimiChan. Now, on with the show. Hello, Greg.
Hello, Mimi. Welcome home.
Thank you. It is good to be home, but honestly, it was rough leaving. I was like, you have to pry my dead cold hands off of this ship. I do not want to come home to Florida. From the Galapagos to Florida, I mean...
Yeah. Proof of evolution in reverse, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. We're not adapting well here in Florida. No. Adaptation is going, I would say, on a regressive. We're going backwards, but it was like remarkable. Everyone keeps asking, how was your trip? And I don't know. I don't know that words or even photos can do justice the wonderment that is the Galapagos, right? And the only way I can describe it is when someone says, "Oh, describe the Grand Canyon and how great it is or big it is," right? And you can, but it's not the same as standing on the side of the cliff and seeing and feeling and smelling and all of it, right? And so the Galapagos is just, they tell you about the animals and how different they are there, and until you experience it, it's just, it's wonderment.
Did you and Oscar have I having never visited the Galapagos, I don't know how it works. Like, how did you get there? I assume they're curated tours or so on, that you're not just like, feel free to wander around and get a soda.
Yeah. You know? So it's super, super strict. And this is actually the first time I'm talking on air about it. So it's kind of good. But basically, you fly to Quito or Guayaquil in Ecuador, and one of those areas will fly to Baltra, which is one of the main, which is the airport and which is the main area for their airport. So you can't sail there or anything like that. Like, you have to take that flight in, and it's quite a process, right? And so from there are several different types of tours one can do. There are quote unquote land tours, which means you're there. There's I don't want to say a local fishing boat, but boats that will take you to the ocean area near the island. And then you take tenders or zodiacs into the islands, because no boats can really dock right there. The 4 inhabited islands where there's humans that live there are boats that can get a little closer, but all of the uninhabited islands, the boats are very, very far away, and the zodiacs take you in, and you do a lot of wet landings. So you have to jump into the water and go ashore, splash into it. Yeah. So it's a process getting there, and it's kind of fascinating because you pack your luggage and they zip tie it, and they're going to go through it. They will take out any useless plastic. You're not allowed to bring plastic water bottles or even plastic bags, unless it's a Ziploc bag that can be reused. So they're very, very, very conscious and careful, and it's just, they start, I don't want to say they're fumigating the plane, but in the middle, right when we're about to land, they start spraying down everything to make sure there's no pests or any bugs, anything that could possibly infiltrate this pristine land. And And you can just see why they're so protective. And the naturalists are the ones that are certified for the national park. They're basically the scientists that know everything about the land, the flora, the animals, and they are the guides that take you around. I was with Celebrity, which is technically a cruise line, but this boat was like, the electric vehicle, the Tesla of ships. Like, it was built for the Galapagos. They recycle the condensation from the air conditioning to use that water. I mean, it was insane, like the stuff that we learned about. But yeah, and then basically that ship took us around for a week to various places, and sometimes 3 different places in a day. Like, we were up at like 6 a.m. and just excursions all day long. It was phenomenal. And exhaustive.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And it doesn't sound like an opportunity where you waste daylight.
No. I mean, it's an optional, like, do you want to go ashore? And the answer is always yes.
No, I came all this way not to.
Yeah, I'm going to sit on the boat and just,
I'm going to read. I'm going to catch up on my reading.
Yeah, this was not a trip I got to do any reading on.
Different carnival tour.
Yeah, totally. It was phenomenal. And just, and I actually I just interviewed one of the naturalists yesterday, actually, in the Galapagos. So I got her information because she was just the stories they tell and the amount of knowledge they have to share. And I didn't realize how extensive and difficult it is to become a naturalist. So it was quite revelatory and just incredible. So yeah, I'm elated, and I don't know. I'm still kind of trying to get back to Florida life. It's not the same, because I was also being I will say, even though it was like a rough and tough adventure trip, I was totally pampered. We went like in first class style. Like, we were on a very nice boat where like you got on board and they had like, everything there for you. Here's your hot chocolate as you come back. It was not like I was roughing it and like, backpacking through the Galapagos.
Sure.
Yes, to be fair. So
it's nice to have a vacation.
It was. And it was interesting to talk to them about climate change and what have they seen on the islands with the animals and just the land, right? And so just really being that close to nature was fascinating. So yeah.
It sounds wonderful. I mean, it sounds genuinely terrific. So
it was amazing. So I'm very fortunate. Yeah, we're very fortunate. We got the opportunity to go. So
good.
Yeah. But we're back, and I'm here talking to you. You're making my transition back easier. I'm like, Greg wants to talk this weekend. Fantastic.
Figured we better get it in before I go off comms again. So
exactly. And then now you're going to be on your plane ride, but you're work all the time.
Yeah. We got a lot of stuff I got to get pinned to the mat and finished off in the next 2 weeks, I think. So
yeah, you're like juggling things too, because it's not like you're just working on one project. I'm quite aware. Yeah. Yeah.
There are a couple things bouncing around. There's something that I'm working on now, and it's feeling very tight-ropey in a way that and we've talked about it before. It's good to scare yourself and be like, I don't know if I can do this. It's much easier to do that when you're alone by yourself. It's far worse when you have to hand it to somebody to read it, and be like, well, this wasn't what we were hoping for. It's like, uh-oh. So I am hoping that won't be the case.
I'm confident.
Well, again, it's nice that you are. And you don't have to write it. So it works out well for you. You can have your confidence.
It really does. And, speaking of which, we talked off air, like, what is this episode going to be about? Because it's always like a grab bag with us. But obviously I'm wearing my Lazarus shirt. And in addition to my welcome home, I got an email I sent you the guts to Risen
that was
7. Like letting a kid into the candy store and saying, here are the keys. I'll be back in an hour. But it's up to you if you want to eat anything or not.
If I come back and find you lying there going, oh, my stomach or not.
Yeah.
So Yeah.
Yeah, pretty much. So, and you're like, did you read it? I said, of course I read it. I had like 0 hours this week, but I read it. And I also
there's a lot of it.
I know. And I also, because I'm OCD, had to go through from Risen 1 and do like a quick like swipe. Because of course I'm on my iPad and like just a quick like, okay, where am I at? Because the little summary doesn't do it
was
me, right?
it was a year ago that 6 came out. So I mean, I don't think it's unreasonable to be like, where did we leave off? There's something to be said for cliffhangers. There's also something to be said about a cliffhanger that lasts for a year is not much of a cliffhanger in that sense. It may be abusing the privilege. So,
well, I feel like there's been a lot happening as well in the world and with our creators. So, you are the creators and we are here to enjoy. And so when the master creators create, that's when we get to enjoy. And
you are being very generous. So
well, it's just really fact, right? Like we don't really have a choice. Also, we have to wait.
Well, yeah, you can jump off the train.
No, I mean, no, that's not an option.
Well, but it is an option, and this is important, and I'm cognizant of it. I am very grateful for, in particular, Lazarus fans right now. And when Black Magic comes back, Black Magic fans who will have endured year-long breaks and because of my stance on social media, no information, right? Because unless they're subscribing to your podcast, they're not really getting updates,
which they totally should be.
Oh yeah, no, I think in general, that's a good policy, regardless of me.
Right.
But yeah, it's you can jump off. That is a choice. Yeah. It is entirely reasonable and fair to say, you know what, guys, I've been with you since 2013, and it would be nice if you hit your deadlines. Saying, yeah, no, that's a problem, and I understand if you're fed up with this.
But I think also there are things as not necessarily like jumping off the train, but going, okay, you know what, I'm gonna wait. And I'm going to wait till it's digestible for me, because I do that with shows, right? I'm totally guilty of doing that with shows. And
I am fond of saying that I watched the first season and a half of Breaking Bad and then didn't watch the rest of it for 3 years. Mm-hmm. Right. Like I got to a certain point, I was like, I actually have to walk away from this. This is really strong medicine.
It's a lot.
I don't claim that what we're doing is anything akin to that emotional journey, shall we say? But it's a long time to wait. Time to wait. So
yeah, I think though that there's everybody's like reading journey and viewing journey is quite different in that way though too. There are people that are like me that will just literally go back and read 1 through 6 and then 1 through 7 and then 1 through, when I say 1, I mean Risen, not all the way back, but I do sometimes, to be honest.
Well, and for me, with 7 being the culmination of so much, it does sort of require going back to issue 1 and making sure, is the internal logic holding throughout. Mm. I hope so. I think so.
Yes.
I am certain. And I say in the, it's a very short letter column because the issue is so big. There's basically a page for the book Rex. And then there's basically a page of me going, yes, we were late. Yes, we stink. Yes, we're sorry.
I'm so sorry.
And here's the plan moving forward. Here's the publishing plan. And saying, and given this, if you want to discuss the issue or speculation about what comes next and so on, I direct people to the Discord, because like you're going to be waiting a while before we can engage in that conversation.
Yeah, yeah, and that's been kind of fun, the Discord, because
I'm curious to see what people will say there. I expect it may get shrill. So yeah.
I don't know, so I am going to drop this probably closer to launch time so that people can be reading and have the spoiler alert thing and whatever, because I think it's inevitable that you and I are going to talk about this because it's on top of mind. And I literally, Oscar's trying to talk to me earlier today. I was like, stop. I'm reading Lazarus right now. Turn that off because I'm trying to focus. Because I'm not one that can read like in a social environment. I need silence. Back when I was in school, it had to be quiet. Like I don't even have music on. I'm very much. I need focus. And so obviously I was like super focused and I was hoping to be able to do a couple reads before talking to you. And he goes, "Well, how long is it?" And I'm like, "It's 56 pages." And he goes, "Oh. Okay, that's like a double." Then and then he had forgotten like the format, for these, and I was like, "Yeah, it's a lot."
Yeah, no, it's a lot of issue. There's a lot in there, and man. a lot happens.
Yeah, and so okay, where to unpack, but I will say back to your. Oh, I'm so sorry. Other comics also do this. Where they go on, they take a break and they leave you on a cliffhanger and they go, "But we'll be back in a year." And
right. But they do it with intention, you see. And what we did between 6 and 7 wasn't intentional.
Right. Between what 6 and 7.
What we're doing next is absolutely intentional. And I don't feel guilty about it. Exactly. But the gap between 6 and 7 or Michael and I are both painfully aware. It's like, yeah, that was a long time between issues. Yeah. I don't feel any guilt in saying, look, we're going to be away at least a year, but we're going to be away at least a year now so that when we come back, there will be 1 3-month delay in this finale. We will get through the first 5 or 6 issues. We will have a skip month. We will have the trade come out. There will be a skip month, and then we will resume with the grand finale. Yeah. And that's the goal. So my biggest concern right now is that I'm going to be rushing to the end, and I don't want to rush it, which is why I've been sort of fiddly about whether or not we have 12 or 14 issues. I want to have a little wiggle room. But the nature of writing in arcs is that the arcs don't lend themselves to distraction, right? This is about this thing. It's this movement of the piece, and it's this movement of the piece. So my biggest concern is that I'm going to write the first 6 or so and then go, oh, we've got to stick something else in here. And it's not going to be 12 or 14. It's going to be 18 or whatnot that'll have to come out.
Jonah or more Casey and Michael.
Oh, goodness. I've written the next issue already. Oh boy. Yeah.
You just breaking my heart.
Interesting that you bring them up. Interesting that you bring them up. Yep.
Yeah. So it's been fun too, because literally as we're speaking, not when this releases, our recent episode, most recent quote unquote episode, which we again recorded a few weeks ago, just dropped. And people are like, "Oh my gosh, Greg has revealed the plan for Lazarus." And so yeah.
What I have? What plan?
Well, the
finish
timeline.
It, you mean?
Yes, yeah, the timeline. The timeline.
I was going to be like, wait until you read 7, then the plan's revealed.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So much to unpack, and I feel like I told you that I'd wanted to drag Michael to a Lazarus chat, and I want him to get to a point where he's.
That's what you should do while I'm off in the bunker and away. You need to reach out to Michael and set that up.
Okay.
All right. Because you talk to me all the damn time.
I know, but
and Michael is. Hey, see, this doesn't happen in a vacuum.
Of course. But I always feel like he's busy I want him to keep drawing.
Sure.
So I'm like, when he's done with. I want him to be. I don't want to interrupt the process.
So sometimes in 2025, you'll get him on the podcast again. That's what you're saying.
right. I will reach out. I actually did reach out to him this past year at some point. I was like, hey, just a note.
Just no,
like,
you gotta keep pushing there because again, with everything that's been going on and so on, he is not ignoring you. He adores you.
Oh,
I know. That's simply I should respond to this. 800 things happen and
no. I don't take it that way at all. But I also know that that means he's probably pretty busy as well.
Yeah,
I mean, with you though, it's like if I don't talk to you, it's like I go through my Greg withdrawal. You know? Like you've made me dependent now.
Oh, good. That's great. Really good. That's a little concerning.
People are waiting. Like, wait, when are you having Greg Rucka on again? If there's been because from last time it was like March to it was like our longest break in forever. It's been
since pandemic, I think.
Yeah. So,
I mean,
we were rolling pretty heavy though during the pandemic.
Yes, we were. It was something for us to do. But yeah, I mean, look, I've been on the Tog shoot, so and it's not that I wouldn't be happy to do a podcast with you from my hotel room as much as it's like I can't guarantee internet or timing.
Yes. So. Yeah, no guarantees, but I am still very determined to get one while you're in Italy because I think it'd be cool. I want to get one.
Try it.
Yeah, well, in all honesty, I'm a little concerned, and by the time this releases, for sure, it'll already have come out. But the podcast I recorded with the naturalist in Galapagos was a chore. Like, she didn't have. I mean, she's in the Galapagos, the signal, and she was like in her because she was in between where she got off the ship, so she was in quarantine to where she was getting back on. She only had a week off, and it was rough. My editors right now are probably like stabbing like doing dark pictures of me right now, like, oh, how could you do this to us? But she had so much amazing things to say. I was like, we're gonna have to figure it out. Like, what are you gonna do? They're in the Galapagos,
and next time you bring a recorder with you.
Yes. And I have done that, but there was no time on the ship. So there was no time for that there because they were also working. Yeah. So I had to get her off and, I just have to go back there is really what this is coming down to. I just have to go back. I know.
Oh, no.
This is like me threatening to go to Italy. I'm like, well, if you don't want to do it online, I guess if I just show up. I'm like,
twist my arm. Yeah.
All right. So in terms of comics, though, I know like you've been frustrated with the timeline and all of that. And I said, like other comics have also done where they've had to take the breaks and schedule and it's also we're dealing, people always seem to forget it's not just your schedule, it's you and Michael's schedule because it's a collaboration. And I think people don't realize like I guess not the number of hours, but the length of time it takes for both of these things to happen are different.
Well, and then and then add in Lazarus is one of the largest staffed books I work on, right? It's got Michael for effectively all of the interior art. It's got Santi for colors. It's got Simon for letters. It's got Alejandro editing and overseeing it. It's got Troutman for design and design elements within the book, right? So every time you see a post screen, and the thing is, the detail on those screens is ridiculous. I suppose if you're reading it digitally and you can zoom in, you might see more.
Yes.
But when these things print, you don't tend to see that he actually has, there's a panel, I will just say this. There is a panel, and in the PDF that I sent you previewing it, it's very hard to read. There's a bit on like page 1 where 8 is playing, her video game.
Her video game, yeah.
And the panel is literally like 5 guys flying in all these directions as her avatar has apparently thrown a grenade or something. But at the bottom, Eric had added like achievement unlocked. And the achievement, and you can't see it.
Yes.
You literally can't see it unless you have the source file, but the achievement reads, let God sort them out. Right?
Okay, I'm looking at it right now, and now that's just hilarious.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like, you're not going to see that, right? I mean, at some point when all is said and done, there's a piece of me that's like, we're going to do, when we're in our dotage and looking for ways to continue to monetize this thing, we'll put out like all of Michael's covers. Michael would love to do just all the issues in black and white, which I think would be interesting.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But doing a collection of all of the Troutman and the other, I was getting to Richard, all the artifacts that Eric and Richard have done in just one collection, like every post screen, all of the interfaces, the care and thought that went into all of them, all of the ads, right? All of that stuff. And then, we have got Crystal Fraser doing the Tools of War column for the RPG. Mm-hmm. Issue 7 has a short story by author Mike Shackle, whose new novel has dropped, I think, about a month and a half ago, mm-hmm. which is the conclusion of his Last War trilogy. So, I mean, there's a lot in this thing.
I know.
And there are a lot of people involved in making it happen. Right. And the head of the train is, obviously Michael and myself. The engine is there, but everybody else on it has to hit their schedule too.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And the ripple effect of failure at one end is substantial. And that's not me ascribing blame as much as to say it's a complicated thing. I mean, in the grand scheme, it's not as complicated as, say, landing a probe on the moon, but there is a complexity to it. And, the way that the work interfaces with our lives is also complex. Mm-hmm. So, look, the goal is, with the next quote unquote series, I said this last time and I say it in the letter column, if we're shooting for 12 or so, I want to have 8 of these things in the can. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I mean, I want 8 of them. I want 8 of them set. So if we had to, we could release them weekly. Mm-hmm. I don't want to release them weekly.
Right. No.
But they should be in condition that if we needed to, we could.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I think I say we, I think you'll get there. You all will get there.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah. What's really great is remembering now and rereading 6 and kind of having seen everybody in that living room. And it's like that showdown between, Jacob and Malcolm, and then having that really come to fruition in 7, and having just forever as she's drinking her coffee. Yeah. And then as the message keeps getting revealed, you're like, what does it say? What is happening? And I loved also getting a little young not teenage, but young, Malcolm, that. Oh, he was someone else for a minute. Oh, but then was he? Then you're like, wait, no, has he always been Malcolm? Because it's you're seeing this young boy to a teenager. And then when they're in college and there's that look, and it was was that genuine, or, is it just
you
Malcolm?
Should have a lot of questions about and the thing is, and Hawk says, that's the way she tells it, mm-hmm. or she told it, but she was a romantic, right? Yes. He says it's subjective. Mm-hmm. And consequently, almost every flashback you see is subjective from the narrative voice at the time. So, there's a panel Michael drew of Malcolm, and, he's 9, 10, sitting in the car with all the books.
With the books, yeah.
And it's the look. It's the third panel in that sequence, right? He's sitting there, he's reading, and you see Shauna's coming down, and then him looking at her. And you can see the anger in this little boy's face.
Yeah.
He was furious early.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's an all-consuming rage. I mean, it is. And you can take that to the bank, if even with everything that is so subjective about what is revealed. What isn't in question is how manipulative and calculated, I should say, rather than scheming, Malcolm was. He may not have known exactly how he was going to do it when he was going to do it, but very early on, he knew what he wanted to do and turned himself to do it. And nowhere is this called out, incidentally, but Arthur Cohn is the classmate in those flashbacks. Right? Like Arthur was with him back that far back. Arthur was part of it.
Okay.
There's a whole story of Arthur Cohn that I don't know if we're ever going to get to tell. That'll be one of the things we could, in theory, do when it's all said and done.
Right. And everyone's tracking these things that you've said. In theory, when it's all done, we may have a XYZ, like everyone's taking note.
We may. I know what this is. I mean, talking about getting way the hell ahead of ourselves. But look, I know what I want to do with Michael after this. And the idea now is starting to pop enough in my head that I actually kind of want to start writing it.
Oh my gosh.
So I actually have to tell that to shut up and sit down and wait its turn, because I've got more I need to write first. But yeah, so we will see. There's plenty to do.
I know. Well, that's great. I like this. I like that there's plenty to do, because that means that we have plenty to read and watch, and
there will be more.
Absorb. Yes. Yeah. Like I said, I was like, I really need to go and really digest this and go through it a lot. But yeah, I wouldn't say that there's a lot of. There is a lot of closure in what's happening in 7, but then you still had to give us that last panel of the plane and Bethany and James, and there's
closure.
There's closure, but it's
there are also questions.
There are also exactly. There's closure, but there's also questions. I love where 7 and 8 are in the, I guess it's a lab. Is it called a lab? Downstairs, and where all
the juxtapositions,
and they're just like this is happening, and then they end up across, the halls, or they're on the other sides, and that was really exciting, and just kind of seeing 8 go from little 8 to now she's 8, right? Because in the earlier times she's very childlike, right?
It's been 4 odd years in the series, so you meet her at 11. Really, she's 15 now, and she's. And one of the things that I really love about 8 is that she's not forever. Like they are sisters.
Yeah.
That they are very different personalities. this is an older sister who is very serious and so on. And 8, Michael draws this sort of impish grin. It's this cockeyed grin he gives 8. That's a little playful and it's a little cocky and it's a little it's mischievous and it's not smug, it's not arrogant, but there's a confidence in it. I mean, it's an look, and I mean, people listening are going to be like, okay, that's a lot of stuff to put into one.
No, but you can see it.
But you can see it. You can see it in her eye and in the twist of the lip. And
I don't remember what issue where they meet for the first time in the woods, and she's like jumping around and playing around, and like even in her actions, but you could see it in her face, even though they're quote unquote identical. And Forever also carries this burden, right? You can feel she's so entrenched in all the things she's already had to do, and so that's where you get a little bit of the innocence of 8, even though she's been through a lot, of course, but nothing like also, what Forever's had to.
Yeah, I mean, Forever's all about economy of movement and motion, and 8 is, she's effervescent. She's literally got energy to spare.
Yeah,
she's kernels in hot oil, and. And one of the things Michael was saying, because we had talked about the hiatus being much longer, because we were both feeling pretty frustrated and disappointed with ourselves with how long it was taking to get this issue done. And at one point, Michael had said to me, I'm worried that we're burnt out. And maybe what we should do is once this issue is done, we should stop and let's do something else. Like we'll do an OGN and then we can come back and do this. And I was like, you know what? I totally hear that. I totally hear that we could do that. And then he got to, and from an artist's point of view, right? The first half of the issue is it, and it's funny, or maybe not funny, but I think for people who don't have to draw comics, for instance, you look at the first 20 odd pages of that issue and you go, well, this is the easy stuff to draw, right? It's just these people talking in this room, really, and moving around a little bit and so on. That stuff is so hard.
Yeah.
And it's hard in many ways, but it was really weighing Michael down. And then he got to sort of the back half with 8 again and all this stuff. And
the action.
Well, and those characters, right? And that's a crucial thing. And we were talking and he said, you just give me more of Forever and 8 and I'll keep drawing this thing, man. And I was like, okay, well, what do you want to do then? Because I'm totally willing to go on a break, but, and he was like, no, let's get this finished. Let's go through. So, I mean, he's got the script for the first issue of the next series.
Yeah.
He's got it. It's in hand. So it's not like we're lagging. And I fully intend to have it's August now. I would like to have the last issue written by March. Right. Wow. And that's with all the other stuff that I know I'm going to have to work on. I want to have this all done. And that way I can print them all out and send them to Michael and say, there, if I die, you can finish it, you know?
Oh my God. That's very dark. I think that it's really fascinating though, because as we're talking through this whole process, I would imagine, and I know because I've had the privilege of speaking with so many comic creators, and I know everyone's collaboration is different. Everyone's writing style is different. Everybody's got different way they take notes. But at the core of it, like the creative part and like this back and forth, the schedules, like there is like this. I mean, you guys probably have like an empathy club where you all know you're dealing with the same challenges and the same issues and everything.
Yeah.
And so it's fascinating to kind of hear that like this whole dynamic and the sword of Lazarus, because I'm sure a lot of comics go through something similar, and then some just don't even make it to the finish line, right?
Well, when I started, in comics, it was and it's weird. Like the very first thing I really ever did in comics was with Steve Lieber, and Steve is. And anybody who has worked with him in the industry will tell you this. He is a remarkable talent, and it is not simply his storytelling comics chop. He is a terrific collaborator. So I went from working with Steve Lieber on Whiteout to doing all this stuff at DC during a period where you didn't even know who was drawing your book. You never talked to the artist. It was a very rare thing when the writer and the artist were in the same place together and were allowed to communicate. And that went on for years, right? And so now, coming back into this place where, look, I do create our own stuff. And part of the reason I do create our own stuff is that I get to pick who I work with.
Yes.
That may be the greatest privilege of it, is that I get to work with the people I want to work with.
Yeah.
And sometimes you got really, really lucky, in the work for hire environment, like a Tangled Web of Spider-Man, right? Issue 4 is the one that I wrote that Eduardo Risso drew. And Axel Alonso was the editor at that time. He asked me to write it. He wanted Eduardo to draw it. And Eduardo and I exchanged maybe 3-4 emails on that issue. And that issue is, if you were to do probably a popular top 10 issues by Greg Rucka, that's up in the top 5, right? A lot of people really like that issue, really like that story. But I claim very little credit for it. The credit for that, the success of that issue, is I wrote, I think, a very serviceable, good, solid script, had a clear story to it, but it was Axel and it was Eduardo who elevated it, right? And that was, I had very little to do with that. I gave them the raw material, but was the script. I had very little to do with it. Beyond that, right, it is very hard for me to look at a lot of the stuff, especially in the early 2000s, that I did for DC and so on, when I wasn't in collaboration, really, and say, well, this is exceptional, or this isn't, or whatnot. You look at the Wonder Woman Rebirth stuff, and I'm talking to Liam and I'm talking to Nick all the time, and it shows. I think it shows in those books. You look at Lois, and Mike Perkins and I were talking all the time, and it shows. So, and we've talked about it before, and it isn't solely in those things that are artistic. It comes up when we talk about sort of artistic pursuits, collaboration. But people working together do better things than people working alone in the main. Sometimes there's stuff that needs to be done alone. But the power of good collaboration, of collaboration that is unified to the goal, that allows for conflict in the process, that allows for people to argue and try to find the best way to do it, right? Where that argument is not tainted by individual ego or insecurity, but is instead driven by the desire to make the best rocket ship, the best car, the best cure for cancer, right? The best comic book. You know, I mean, we're social animals. We work together. Mm-hmm. That's what our societies are about. And when we impede or deny it or actively try to work against it, guess what? Society suffer. Surprise, who'd have thunk, right? So
I think you're right, though. A lot of those arcs and pieces that you mentioned, there is a definitive like, ooh, that one, not just that it was a hit, but it hit because you're right. You can almost feel like when things were very cohesive, and you can almost feel when there was no communication, like anything else. And it makes so much sense, which is why it's kind of weird that it was like that, where you never really spoke to the artist. Like it's very strange.
It was very much the product of the time.
Yeah.
But it was jarring for me. And it taught me, I think, some bad habits for a couple of years that I then had to, you know, divorce myself of.
Right.
And it may have been, you know, my first editor in prose, she didn't want to talk to me about what I was doing. She just wanted me to send her a manuscript. Mm. And when I found out there were writers who had editors that they talked to all the time, I was stunned.
Okay.
I was stunned. I was like, really? You have a relationship with your editor outside of them just typing up the file? If I saw this editor once a year, right? Mm-hmm. But until I had a manuscript for her, she didn't want to know me.
I see.
And I was young enough to think that that was appropriate, and young enough to accept it, not to say this is not working. This is a problem.
Right. And I think inexperienced in terms of like, now, you know, as you've changed and grown and gone through processes, you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't really the best way that we could have worked. That wasn't the best way to get good work out of me as well, right? Like
that was
work,
it. It may work perfectly well for other novelists.
Yeah.
You know, Bendis. Once he said it years ago. I don't know if he still believes this, but he once said, "Look, if you're talking about the story, that means you don't want to write it." And to me, that's absolutely not true. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right? I want to talk about it because in talking about it, I can articulate it, and I can start to see. I can see my mistakes before I write them. Right. and I can explore new ideas and you know, for me, engaging and just giving it air, putting it into the world like that makes this thing real before it's been created. Mm-hmm. Then all I have to do is to type it. I was talking to, and I've said this multiple times as well, but when I was in Italy before I came home, I was speaking to a very smart muckety muck from Netflix who had come to check me, who was there just to see the filming that day, and knew I was working on this other thing, and said, "So how's it coming?" And I said, "It's getting there." And he said, "Effectively, have you started writing it?" "Yeah." And I said, "Yeah, that's what all of this is." If you're asking if I've started typing, that's a different question, right? The typing is the easy part for me. Mm-hmm. I type real fast, right? I've got decades and decades of touch typing experience under my belt. I type real quick. Knowing what to type is the trick.
Yes.
and that's where the writing is in large part. In large part, it's knowing how to then say the things that you want to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, these things go together. And, and the executive in question sort of looked at me and said, yeah, I don't understand how you guys do what you do. And I said, that's okay. I don't understand how you do what you do. So it works out well for both of us.
Right. This is my job. That's your job.
Yeah. And there's probably a good reason for it. So yeah. And I'm not throwing stones. And again, when we talk about this and we talk about process and things like that,
yeah,
it's always what's going to work for you. Because what works for you will work for you. It may not work for me.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's interesting though, because I see you in your bunker, and then that's when you're ready to type. Is that correct, or is that where you're writing?
Yeah. No, that's when I've gotten to the point where it's like, okay, now it's time to start making it manifest.
Okay, got it.
And so I'm going to go back over. I've been going to. My parents bought a small condo like 20 odd years ago here in Portland, because they had imagined being able to spend their retirement, up near grandkids and going back and forth and so on. And Pop passed away. Mom has Parkinson's. This condo is still furnished, is not used. Small, it's in a quiet location. And oddly, like I was finishing Private Wars. It might have been Gentleman's Game was the first time I went over there to write, right? And it's conducive, right? It's got just enough to be comfortable and not enough to be distracting.
Yes, that's a great balance.
And so yeah, I'm going back over today, and I know what I'm writing today.
Yeah.
And if I can hit 10 to 12 pages a day for the next couple days, this thing's going to be pretty much done.
Nice.
So,
and once you enter that mode, do you ever go, oh wait, I have this thing about this other project, I'm jumping to that. Because it's in my mind, or you just like that you're there and that's it. And that's what you're doing.
I mean, I can't sit there and just do this for 8 hours straight. I can't. But what I can do is do this for, 2 hours straight, and then stop and do something else for 15, 20, 30 minutes, and then go back to it. And in those 15, 20, 30 minutes, I can answer emails. I can work on, I can get a post up for the play-by-post game I'm in, or things like that, so that I change gear enough.
Check the Discord.
Yeah, exactly. And then get back into it.
I see.
When I was younger, I could knuckle down and do 4 or 5 hours of typing at a time. But it wasn't healthy. It exacts a physical toll, if nothing else.
Yeah. Oh man. And then in terms of Lazarus, because I'm still like sitting here talking to you, literally,
like I said, there's a whole other conversation to have about that issue.
I know, and it's staring at me, and I feel like there's going to be multiple conversations, and we'll have time anyway, because this one's going to have to hold us over for quite a while.
Yeah. So, we can do close reads.
Yeah. There you go. But I have to say, I just didn't. I mean, I guess I don't think about James that much as a character. I don't really think about him very often. And wow, you really like threw him in my face here at the end, where he kind of loses it.
It's who he's always been.
Yeah.
You meet him in the very first issue. He's a moral coward.
Yes.
He has always been a moral coward. And as you learn more and more, and you look at him throughout the series, and you look at his behaviors, and he is always the guy who has said yes. He is always the guy who says, are we going to get in trouble for this?
Right.
Right. This is a guy who is a chicken shit. And
And we know so many people like that parallel in our universe.
He is absolutely. And when the chips are down, he did exactly what he was going to do, which was.
I mean, it makes sense when you lay it out like that. But I guess I just, it's like, oh, yeah, that's him being him. And then just at the end here where he just like really freaking loses it. And then he's fighting with Bethany. And then I was just like, what? Stop. What are you doing? Just keep your hands to yourself. And then, because at this point now, you've made me like Bethany again, because through 7, like at the beginning, I think I would have been happy if she'd gotten shot. Moving on, off with her. Let's keep going. And then now you've, 7 issues through, you feel differently because you learn about some of the things she's been through.
It's the same thing with Jonah, right?
Yes.
Jonah, I mean, it's like
and Johanna.
You just loathe Jonah when you meet him.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to, 27, 28, you're like,
28, yeah.
I understand who this guy is and how he got there. And with Johanna, again, you start to see it. There's a moment in issue 6 where, and again, there's a lot of it's subtext, but, when Abby and Malcolm board the plane and Joe and Forever are already on the plane, it's the first time that Johanna has seen Abby in years and years. Right? She just hasn't come out of her room. They've all known she's there.
Right.
But they've all get the answer pretty much that Malcolm gets when he goes, which is she doesn't want to see you.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, it's something of a trope, but and maybe it's simply an issue of me getting older. I find myself less interested in characters who are all one thing or all something else. That there is complexity at work in these human beings. If we want to grant them full investment as characters, then we want to look at them and go, I want you to ask, I mean, this is a big spoiler, right? But I want you to ask when you read 7, did Malcolm love Leia? Did he really love her? Did he fall in love with her? Like, and then did he go, oh, this is the plan. And then, but I also need this. And if that's the case, then does that mean that what happened to Leia, never mind the crime, and I'm talking around it, right? Because again, I'm trying to be spoiler cognizant.
I mean, I think at this point,
but look at his relationship with Abby in that context with what is said,
mm-hmm.
right? Did he sacrifice as a playing piece his true love?
Mm-hmm.
To get the piece he needed to achieve the goal he wanted. There is no warmth between Abby and Malcolm.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
she proclaims she hates him even more.
Well, she says,
which she didn't think was possible.
Is it true?
Yes.
And she says, well, it's hardly like I could loathe you more than I already do.
Loathe, yeah.
And then he says, yes. And she says, well, it turns out I could.
Right.
Surprise never ceases to surprise me, the depths of my contempt for you.
Exactly. And I think as a reader, it's the same. Because it's not like at any point I've ever had any love for this character. And then you're just like, oh, but he can sink lower. Oh, but he can disappoint more or disgust you. Maybe disgust you more is like.
And I'm certainly not going to say, oh, come on, people should totally understand and love Malcolm.
Right.
They shouldn't. They absolutely shouldn't. But he's not wrong. When he gives his monologue, he's not wrong. That's a read on the world that is entirely valid. and fair and arguably quite accurate.
Mm-hmm.
And if all of the horrible, vile, shitty things he has done are in service to changing that, defeating that, it is interesting to me that this is the issue where Malcolm says, his goal was never to be the wealthiest guy.
Mm-hmm.
That was not his goal. And he's not lying. When he gives his little speech there, that's probably the most honest. That and in the play to win speech are probably the most honest things he's ever said in the series. He is not lying about his motives.
Right. No. You believe
means.
That's believable. Yeah, his means to the end.
His means where you're like
questionable.
You're pretty vile. But then it begs the question, and this is an open question, because what he's describing is our world. Mm-hmm. And what he's describing is our world today in many ways. You got another solution? I mean, if his diagnosis of the cancer is correct, was there another solution?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not going, thank God Malcolm did this. Right?
Well, I found it interesting also that Johanna kind of saved him and is like, no, there's still something there. Like for her to want, like that's still her father. Like she still has affection for him as dad.
That's her daddy.
Even after everything, even through it all. And like, that's still her dad. Like she still has a tie. Yeah.
The next issue, man. Oh boy.
Every issue you say that to me. You're like, oh boy.
Again, we'll have to talk about it in 18 months or whatnot. But yeah.
Well, I'm going to talk to you about it sooner, but other people just won't get to hear about it. I'm pulling my privilege on this. I'm totally going to be like, oh, well, we'll talk about it. But
all right. Should I be sending you the scripts? Is that what I should do?
Absolutely.
All right.
I'm like, like I said, you just unleash the kid in the candy store with like free reign. I'm like, no supervision. What are you going to do? If you feel like reading this, go for it. I'm like, oh, come on, Greg. You know I'm going to read it.
I wasn't that dismissive.
No, but you're like, if you feel compelled.
Well, some people don't. Some people are like, I want to have the whole thing, or I don't want to see it in advance or whatnot. I mean, God bless Matthew Clark. He will not watch trailers anymore. He stopped watching trailers for anything like 4 or 5 years ago. He just won't watch.
Well, especially because now trailers literally, it's like, oh, well, that's the movie.
Yes, here's the whole thing.
Trailers have changed a lot in that way. Like you basically get the whole plot to the end with the reveal. So you're kind of like,
and here's how it's going to end.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what trailers are like now, which is
save me $20. Thank you.
Exactly. I'll make a decision on this later. But oh my gosh! All right, well. I know we have to wrap up because we're coming on the hour, and you have to go to the bunker and all of that. And I'm going to. Hopefully this will release later than another episode that I record with you while you're in Italy. Oh my gosh, we're like time.
Well, if all goes well, like I say, I've got probably about 2 weeks before I go back. So maybe we can talk next week.
Okay, that sounds like a plan. So,
all
right, listeners, there's sort of spoilers here in Lazarus, and sort of
you better big spoiler tag us up front.
Yeah, I'm going to do that at the front, but hopefully, I want questions because there'll be more Greg Rucka as usual. So, until next time,
it's always
Emily
great to
above
see
all.
Emily above all. Say hi to everyone.
Will do.
All right, bye.
Bye. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at SifuMimiChan on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook.